and then the recorder's on.
Okay.
All right, well, all right, welcome to tonight's community Let's Talk session. Would you please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The school board recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues. Community members requesting permission to address the board are required to complete a registration form prior to speaking on the topic of the Let's Talk session. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer. No person may address or question board members individually. No participant may speak more than once, are limited to 3 minutes, and may not pass minutes to the participant, and must only speak on the topic in which the Let's Talk session is addressed. The purpose of tonight's community's Let's Talk session is to provide you and other members of the community with the opportunity to speak to the board and safety committee on the recommendation to the board regarding weapon detection devices and other safety initiatives. We more than welcome your input, suggestions, and questions that will help us become a better school system, serving the needs of our district students and staff members. Per board policy 167.3, the presiding officer may prohibit public comments which are frivolous, repetitive, or harassing, and may request individuals to leave a meeting when the person behaves in a manner that's disruptive of the orderly conduct of the meeting. Remarks by any person addressing the board will reflect adversely upon the character or motives of any other person or group are considered out of order and will not be tolerated. If you wish to speak during the Let's Talk session on the topic of weapon detection devices and other safety initiatives, please fill out the form below. It's back right. And return it to either myself or Ms. Deutsche. So at this time, can I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please? I have a motion from Mr. DeMaio. Can I have a second?
I will second.
Seconded by Ms. Smith. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of adopting the agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The agenda has been adopted 5-0. So at this time, we'll begin our Let's Talk session. Dr. White.
Good evening. I want to thank those in the audience from the community that were able to come out this evening. I know what the weather being what it is. We appreciate your attendance, and also that we have a number of community members, staff members that may be watching at home as we're broadcasting the meeting tonight. Almost a bit of a trial run, if you will. Our technology department is here. We appreciate your help and attendance with this. It's a bit of a trial run, if you will. Going forward, I believe beginning in July of this year, the state of Indiana will require all board meetings, that are public board meetings, to be broadcast and available. So we're using tonight as a bit of an opportunity to work on that as we move towards July. So any input that you have about the quality of the broadcast, the feedback, the audio, video, etc., we'd love to hear about that as we learn more about this process. So as far as my comments, I'll try to keep it brief, just sort of orient us on the process that occurred the first semester in a broad-based safety committee that was put together by the school district. I'm going to read off of just a few summary comments off of a document that was sent to the school system and all community members, family members, staff members back in December, and we've sent this out a few times, so I'm not going to go through every part of it, but a few highlights that I think are pertinent. We decided to put a safety committee together to study the possibility of implementing weapon detection systems at entry points of our schools. Some schools across the United States have implemented this approach. I think many of us have seen and gotten used to seeing this in some public context, in forums like a concert or the airport, of course. So it's become somewhat more common in different facets of our society. We had a situation back in September that we'll classify as a rumor threat situation that occurred in our middle school. We have had, and many school districts have had these things happen from time to time. On the outset of that event, that particular morning, we ended up spending over 2 hours in terms of in partnership with the Warren County Sheriff's Office and School Resource Officer Paul Adams, who's here tonight, our School Resource Officer here at the high school. We very much appreciate his work, and we ended up spending 2 hours basically checking every individual student and going through this extensive process of sort of following up on this rumored threat that ended up being nothing more than a rumor, that its origin was found with some kids just sort of speculating the night before, and it kind of grew to a life of its own. So on the outset of that, we kind of asked ourselves this question: perhaps there would be a peace of mind, a deeper sense of safety if we had students go through a detection system every morning upon their arrival at school. We put a committee together that had a wide range of individuals, community members, parents represented each of our 5 schools, many from PTO groups, but not all. In addition, some of those individuals were in law enforcement, some were not. And then we had, of course, administrators involved, teachers in the school district. Our school board members were engaged in the process. So I think many of us, and I will acknowledge myself included, went into that process really pretty favorable about the idea of implemented weapon detection systems at our entry points. I personally had pretty well come to the conclusion at that moment in time, we probably should go down this road. This is probably a pretty good idea. And I think a lot of people that came forward in that committee were thinking similar, not everybody, but certainly quite a few. We did extensive study. We looked at both research and articles regarding the pros and cons of weapon detection systems. We looked at some case studies and saw that there were a number of things out there arguing both for or against. But that there was a fair amount of literature out there about potential that you could not 100% assume in every instance that a weapon detection system was going to find the very thing it's designed to detect, including some studies involving our national airport system and some studies done by the federal government that caught our attention. That those studies revealed that there were a fair number of tests that the very things that were to be detected got through. So those are the kinds of things that I think cause us, okay, we really need to look at this from all angles. So the committee was put into 4 subgroups that studied what the impact would be on our school environments, what else could we look at, and then 2 groups that studied logistical realities. Okay, if we're going to actually do this at DeGray High School, what is it going to look like? What entry points, what time would school start, how long will it take to get kids through, how much staff are we going to need? Really detailed questions like that, and also the elementary groups. What we began to realize as we really dug into the work, there were multiple committee night meetings, and the subgroups went through this work, and we began to find a couple of things that became very strong themes. There were a lot of concerns around the logistics around really making this work as a consistent and not sort of just a kind of a show or a look of safety, but to really do it with a high degree of integrity and fidelity, like we attempt to be seen at, say, our national airports. What would it really look like in terms of the amount of staff, et cetera? And the logistics challenges that we really got into and talked about around what that would look like. It really got to enough concern that many in the committee began to shift their thinking from maybe this isn't realistic, and the money we're potentially talking about spending on these detection systems, which is anywhere from about $35,000 to $70,000 for one unit, depending on which type and how much additional support and software you buy with it. The thinking began to shift to maybe that this is such a logistic challenge that maybe this money should be spent some other places. Just as one quick issue regarding the logistical challenges, we began to think about issues like, if you think about today, and the snow we have today in the winter, even as efficient as possible, you're going to have lines and groups of students waiting to enter this point of entry, which would probably be just inside the building. But unless you come up with something really unique, you're going to have students waiting outside. You've not only got the weather elements, but you also have, it's potentially just as unsafe to have large numbers of students congregated in an outside space in the open on a daily basis, that if somebody really wants to do something sinister and execute an attack. So we got to worrying about that, so we have to bring everyone inside. How do you do that? And how do you do it in a way that you bring them inside, but they're not in the building yet? Because we got to take it to this. Because think about what happens at the airport and the sort of cordon off area that you weave through. We had a lot harder time figuring out how do you do that within a school. The school wasn't designed for that type of thing. So that's just one example. That's not the only one, but that's one example of how the concern shifted from maybe this isn't as realistic as we thought, and maybe this money should be spent on some other things. And I'll conclude by just highlighting some of those other points. So instead of the detection systems, the focus began to look at the reality and the data that most school attacks, events, school shootings happen after the school day starts and you started the instruction day. So the focus has always been on securing the building, and the conversation became, how do you further enhance that secure entry to keep attackers out? If they come in, you slow them down, you limit access until law enforcement can arrive. So we started looking at things like going even deeper into the secure entry that we already have at our 5 schools. Just as one example, take the middle school. You walk into the middle school, there's a big lobby entryway, and there are interior doors that access the different academic needs of the school. We can close those doors with a one-button relay situation at this time. But there are other interior doors in the building further out into the perimeter. If you think about the exterior entry points of the middle school going towards the north, there are sets of doors there too. So as one recommendation, what would it look like to put all the interior doors that give you entry to different hallways in the middle school, not just at the lobby? What would it cost to put all those interior doors in the same relay that would shut them all down in one swift move as a part of a secure entry situation? So we're working on some secure sort of estimates around that. That situation alone, in just initial conversation, perhaps around $25,000 to make something like that happen. So the conversation has shifted from spending that money in detection systems to things like I just described to deepen the secure entry at our middle school. Things like that can be looked at all 5 of our schools. Each of the 5 schools have some unique aspects and challenges to deepen the secure entry and the secure aspect inside the building. So those would be the kinds of things that the committee recommended is pursued instead of the detection systems. A couple of other examples included additional radios for staff, additional locking options for classroom doors. We have some classrooms in the district that the staff member has to go outside into the hallway and with a key lock it from the outside. Most of our doors lock from the inside, but not all. We have a couple of situations, 2 schools in particular, where we have some situations where you've got to go out the hall. Well, what if the nature of the school safety incident is such that the staff member doesn't feel comfortable going out in that moment of time? Some additional locking options that would be available in those situations for those individuals. And then, of course, it depends on if the door opens out into the hallway or inside into the classroom. Each of those 2 scenarios have different solutions that are anywhere from $25 a unit to $250. So again, that would be another example that the committee is saying, let's really deeply pursue that and let's put funds there instead of the detection system. So that's a bit of I probably talked longer than I was meaning, but just a bit of an overview as to the committee's work and the public, kind of the summation publication we put out. So. Oh, and I just wanted to thank the committee members that were involved. There were a number of them available, and I do see a couple here. Dan and Mary Jane Scrooge, I appreciate your, and they're here tonight, and your involvement in that committee. I may be missing some others, but we just had a lot of good community engagement that led to the recommendations that I saw.
Great, thank you, Dr. White. Any questions, comments from board members at this time? I do not believe we have any slips turned in. Dan or Mary Jane, do you have anything you would like to add? Be part of this meeting? All right, so with that being said, we have no public comment. At this time, I am going to entertain a motion to approve the recommendation of the safety committee to seek other avenues to secure our schools through other means of safety initiatives other than the implementation of weapon detection devices, some of which have been discussed tonight. So may I have a motion, please, to approve the recommendation? Yeah, motion from Mr. Goddard. Have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Shale. Is there any further discussion from the board? Okay, so all those in favor of approving the recommendation of the safety committee to seek other avenues to secure our schools through other means of safety initiatives other than the implementation of the weapon detection devices, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. And that will pass 5-0. We have nothing else on the agenda. Correct. So our next regular board meeting will be held at 6 p.m. in the central office on Monday, January 27th. Is there any further business from the board? Okay, since there is no further business, we appreciate those who attended tonight's community Let's Talk session, both in person and online. And this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.